UFC 329, this year's UFC International Fight Week card is the best Conor McGregor fight card of all time. That is, of course, with UFC 205 excluded. There are 6 matchups on the undercard alone that feature ranked fighters, and 3 of them can be labeled as borderline number 1 contender style matchups. The UFC debut of a massive name in the world of wrestling, former champions and undefeated prospects. There's a little bit of something for everyone on this UFC 329 card, and it's good to see the UFC going all in on this Conor McGregor fight card because we are so used to, in the past, having just Conor at the top of the bill for pay-per-views and then the rest of the card not being as strong. But this time around, that is absolutely not the case, and we have to talk about all of the big matchups right now. The co-main event is a massive fight in the lightweight division as we will see the number 5 ranked Benoit St. Denis taking on the number 6 ranked Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. This is a battle of 2 of the best European mixed martial artists in the UFC right now, one of which is on a massive tear looking to insert himself into title contention, and the other looking to rebound from his first UFC loss. For the God of War, for BSD, for Benoit St. Denis, he will enter UFC 329 on a 4-fight win streak, all 4 of them by way of stoppage, which is no surprise because every single one of his professional wins has come by way of finish, and he has progressively worked his way up the ranks in this 155-pound division all the way to that number 5 spot, and the win streak came on the heels of a 2-fight skid where it looked as though Benoit St. Denis had reached his peak already, and maybe he was never going to insert himself into the upper echelon of this 155-pound weight class, but it is safe to say that that was absolutely not the case, and he has turned his career completely, now looking to win his 5th consecutive fight and maybe even earn himself a shot at lightweight gold depending on how he performs. As far as the win streak goes, it started with a short notice opponent in Kyle Prepolek. That was last May at UFC 315 where he would stop him via submission in the second round and then follow that up by shutting down the hype, at least at that point in time, in September of last year, that surrounded Mauricio Houfi with a near shutout performance en route to getting a stoppage win in front of his home Paris, France crowd. And then at Madison Square Garden, UFC 322 last November, Benoit St. Denis would pick up his 3rd win of the year, and this time it only took 16 damn seconds as he would knock out Beneil Dariush. And he already has a win under his belt in 2026, and now he's looking to make it 2-0. The first came against Dan Hooker, and that was at UFC 325, where he would beat on him for 9 minutes and 45 seconds before securing the ground and pound TKO finish. And with each passing fight, with each victory, with each stoppage win that Benoit St. Denis continues to add to his resume and record, that fight that he had against Dustin Poirier in March of 2024 at UFC 299 continues to look like one of those circumstances that we see time and time again with young prospects, and that was, it was too much, too soon. But he has made the proper adjustments, even following the dominant loss that he had to Renato Moicano, and he looks all the part of an elite level lightweight, and if he can beat Paddy Pimblett, this is a man that can potentially hold the lightweight title in his future. And being that he is only 30 years of age, he is right now in his prime. And as I stated, has a 100% finish rate with 6 knockouts and 11 submissions, has been finished in 2 out of his 3 losses. This man rarely knows what a judge's scorecard is. And I'm going to be very curious to see how the skill set of Benoit St. Denis can match up with the baddie out of England, Paddy Pimblett, who is also right in his prime at 31 years of age, although does not hold the momentum that BSD does as he enters this bout off of his first UFC loss, and that came in an interim championship bout against Justin Gaethje at UFC 324, where he would go tit for tat for 25 minutes, but ultimately it was Gaethje who would land the more damaging blows and put a beating on Paddy Pimblett as the fight progressed into those championship rounds. And obviously that loss for Paddy Pimblett, although there are no good losses, has aged like a fine wine because Justin Gaethje is now the undisputed lightweight champion after dethroning the undefeated Ilia Topuria last month at the UFC White House event. Prior to the Gaethje loss in January of this year, Paddy Pimblett hadn't tasted defeat since September of 2018 and was on a 9-fight win streak that featured 7 wins in a row in the UFC dating back to his debut in September of 2021. And of those 7 UFC wins that he has already, 5 of them have come by way of stoppage, including wins over Michael Chandler and King Green, who is competing on the main card opener against Terrance McKinney. Holy shit, that fight's gonna bang. I do still think that there is potential for Paddy Pimblett to challenge for a title once again and maybe become a champion, but there were some holes in that fight against Gaethje Gaethje that I felt needed patched up, and has he had the proper time to make those adjustments here against a very dangerous Benoit Saint Denis. And I'm also going to be curious to see how the grappling takes place in this bout, or if any of it takes place at all, because BSD has obviously 11 submissions to his name and is known for his grappling skill set, but clearly can finish fights on the feet. Just see his knockout against Beneil Dariush. And for Paddy Pimblett, much of the same can be said for him, as he also has double-digit submission wins on his record, and even out-wrestled and out-grappled Michael Chandler, and with relative ease, may I add. But as Paddy says, Scousers can't get knocked out, and damn it, he somehow didn't get stopped by Justin Gaethje, so I have a hard time seeing anyone being able to stop Paddy Pimblett, at least by way of knockout, as out of his 4 professional losses, 3 of them have come by way of decision. However, he has been submitted one time, which is maybe something to consider if you're going to be betting on this fight. I don't really envision a world where this fight can be boring. Benoit Saint Denis doesn't really have that fight style, and while Paddy has had a couple of stinkers in the UFC, more often than not, he is getting stoppages, and he is putting on entertaining bouts, including one of the best fights of 2026 thus far against Gaethje. This is a big time fight for both men because BSD is at the highest point in his career to date, and he doesn't want to suffer a setback now. And for Paddy Pimblett, if he falls short twice in a row, you best believe there's going to be large portions of the MMA community coming for his neck, calling his hype overrated and his skill set not that of an elite level lightweight. So can Paddy Pimblett bounce back from his first UFC loss and insert himself into the top 5 of the division once more and place himself potentially just one more win away from a lightweight title opportunity? Or can Benoit Saint Denis pick up his 5th consecutive win, and if he does it by way of stoppage once more, you're going to be hard pressed to find a more deserving contender in this weight class for a title other than Arman Tsarukyan, if I'm being quite frank. And at worst, I feel that BSD would only need one more win after this one, similar to Paddy Pimblett, and for both men, that matchup could potentially come against someone like an Ilia Topuria, but that's a conversation for next week. For now, I want to get your predictions for this lightweight co-main event in the comments below. Next, we move to the bantamweight division for a supremely high-level mixed martial arts contest, as we will see the former title challenger and number 4 ranked Cory Sandhagen taking on the number 7 ranked Mario Bautista. This will be the first fight for the 34-year-old Sandman since losing in his title opportunity to Merab Dvalishvili last October via decision, as prior to that he had won 4 out of 5 bouts, with the only loss coming to Umar Nurmagomedov, and the victories were against Song Yadong, who currently sits in the top 5, Rob Font, Marlon Chito Vera, a former title challenger, and Davison Figueiredo, the former flyweight great. Cory Sandhagen is clearly one of the most elite level bantamweights on the planet and one of the best 135-pound fighters that we have ever seen not to hold a title, and you know that that is not the moniker that he wants to have surrounding his name. He wants to reach the tippy top of this sport, but unfortunately for Cory, he has been able to deliver in big fights, but not in the biggest fights of his career, and he once again finds himself in one of those big fights where he typically does get victories more often than not. But it is not going to be easy for him to beat someone like Mario Bautista, who is well versed in all facets of mixed martial arts just like Cory is. These two can get the job done anywhere that the fight goes, whether that be in the striking, in the grappling, the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu. This matchup is a true representation of just how stacked and good this bantamweight division is, arguably the best in all of the sport. For Mario, at 33 years old, also in his prime with a record of 17-3, he was on an 8-fight win streak between February of 2022 and June of 2025 that featured victories over Ricky Simon, Jose Aldo, and a debuting Patchy Mix, and that momentum would be halted in a massive opportunity that he had against Umar Nurmagomedov last October at UFC 321, where Umar would get the decision victory. But it didn't take long for Mario to already get that needed bounce back, and he did it in February by not only dominating Vinicius Oliveira, who was on fire heading into his first UFC main event, but submitting him with just 14 seconds to go in round number 2. And if Mario can beat Cory, that would be the biggest win of his career and his 10th victory out of his last 11 bouts. Another guy that, similarly to Benoit Saint Denis, would be hard to deny him a title opportunity with that type of streak. The problem more so for Mario in this bantamweight division is how crowded the title picture is right now, because Petr Yan dethroned Merab Dvalishvili last December. They are now one apiece and likely going to be booked for a trilogy. Sean O'Malley just knocked out Ayman Zahabi in June at UFC White House. He's a former champion and a huge name. You know the UFC wouldn't mind giving him another shot at gold. And Umar Nurmagomedov just got booked to fight against Song Yadong. That's number 3 versus number 5 going down in August And that fight could equally be viewed like this one as a potential number one contender opportunity. You see what I'm saying about how damn good this division is? So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this matchup, not only what your predictions are, but what you foresee happening in the future for both of these fighters, because I feel like both of them will position themselves one win away at worst from a title shot, but all it takes at 135 pounds is a convincing, emphatic finish, and that is exactly what Sean O'Malley did. So can one of these two men one up what he did? And then in August, can one of either Umar or Song Yadong one up the winner of this bout? It is essentially one big cloudy Grand Prix right now with uncertainty, but a plethora of great options to choose from if you're the UFC, and that's a hell of a problem to have. And much like the co-main event and the featured bout, we have another fight here that could potentially be labeled as a number one contender fight. This main card is disgusting, as we will see the former title challenger and number 4 ranked Raw Dog Brandon Royval taking on the surging number 6 ranked Lonier Kavanagh, who just put the whole MMA community on notice earlier this year. For the 33-year-old Royval, he actually will enter UFC 329 on a 2-fight skid, knockout loss to Manel Kopp and a decision loss to Joshua Van in one of the best fights of 2025 last summer. But prior to the skid that he has right now, he had won 5 of his last 6, with the only loss coming in a title fight against Alexandre Pantoja. And that stretch included victories over Tatsuro Taira, the former title challenger that just fought against Joshua Van earlier this year, and Brandon Moreno, the former multi-time champion. Royval is one of the most entertaining fighters to watch in this flyweight division, and he is always down to scrap. And although he was knocked out against Manel Kopp in December of last year, that's all Manel Kopp is doing right now is knocking people out, as he is on a 4-fight knockout win streak and should absolutely be fighting for the flyweight championship in his next bout after Alexandre Pantoja and Joshua Van settle their rivalry. But regardless of how good the level of competition is that Brandon Royval has faced, you do not want to go on a 3-fight losing streak, because you go from a title contender to slipping far down the totem pole closer to the top 10 than you are to a title shot. And after what we just saw out of Lonier Kavanagh earlier this year, Brandon Royval is going to have to pull out all of the stops if he wants to get his hand raised on Saturday night. The 27-year-old out of England, Lonier Kavanagh, is 10-1 as a professional and is coming off of an absolutely dominant performance and victory against the aforementioned former multi-time champion Brandon Moreno in Moreno's home country of Mexico back in February. The two would compete for 25 minutes, with Kavanagh hurting Moreno more times than we had really ever seen him be hurt before, and not only looked like a top-level flyweight, he looked like an elite-level flyweight. Damn it, he looked like a future title holder in my opinion, especially when you take into account how young he is, not even in his prime yet, and all of the high-level competition that Brandon Moreno had faced before. And that's why it's crazy to think, and this is no slight toward the man that I'm about to mention, Charles Johnson, but he knocked out Lonier Kavanagh in August of last year and kind of shut down the hype train that Lonier Kavanagh had as an undefeated 9-0 fighter heading into that clash. But he righted the ship in a massive way, because not only did he dominate Brandon Moreno, but he took that fight on short notice. Not many people thought that he would compete against Moreno, let alone win, and so it was an absolutely shocking and eye-opening performance for me as a fight fan. And he showed off his skill set in that fight, looking virtually unstoppable in all facets of the fight game, not allowing Brandon Moreno to get going whatsoever, and he did not have any answers to the questions that Lonier was throwing at him in that fight. And if he can come out and compete anywhere close to how he looked in February, I have a hard time imagining Brandon Royval getting a victory against Kavanagh, who was absolutely on fire a few months ago. And kind of similar to how the bantamweight title picture is right now, it is also very crowded at flyweight, because like I said, Pantoja needs to return from injury and settle the beef with Joshua Van. You have Manel Kopp waiting in the wings. So obviously the winner of this fight, whether that be Royval or Kavanagh, is probably going to have to sit and wait, or maybe fight one more time. And so damn it, man, if you're the UFC, if you're the matchmakers, if you're the boss man Dana White, you've got to be happy about how some of these divisions are playing out right now with these elite level fighters. The next generation has truly arrived. So who do you think is going to come out victorious in this flyweight scrap? Will it be Royval shutting down that momentum of Kavanagh, or Lonier continue to go undefeated in the UFC against guys named Brandon and insert himself into the top 5 of the flyweight division, positioning himself up for a massive opportunity at the end of the year or early on in 2027. And now we have to move into the prelims that also features 3 ranked matchups, and the prelim headliner will feature a former middleweight great and champion. That's right, it's It's Bobby Knuckles. It's the Reaper. It's Robert Whittaker moving up to the light heavyweight division to challenge the perennially top 15 ranked and current number 12, Nikita Krylov. Whittaker, at 35 years of age, will be moving up to his third UFC weight class because we can't forget that he came in on The Ultimate Fighter at welterweight, then would move up to middleweight and become the champion, and now debuting at 205 pounds, which I think is a very interesting move because it's not as though Robert Whittaker was the biggest middleweight that I've ever seen, let alone how he's going to look at light heavyweight. Krylov is going to be 3 inches taller and have a 4-inch reach advantage, and I would have to imagine is just going to be the natural, more dense and thick fighter when they step into the cage, but I guess we're going to see on Friday morning how Bobby Knuckles looks at 205. I am curious to see how his frame will be different than at 185. Regardless, Whittaker is in need of a victory because he finds himself on a 2-fight skid, having not gotten his hand raised since June of 2024 when he knocked out short notice opponent Ikram Aliskerov in the main event of UFC Saudi Arabia. Since then, he fought and lost to Khamzat Chimaev, getting submitted in the first round, and then had a main event in Abu Dhabi last summer where he would lose a split decision very closely contested to Renier de Ritter. The last time that Robert Whittaker has lost twice in a row, you have to go all the way back to August of 2013 and February of 2014, where he would lose to Court McGee and be knocked out by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and both of those, of course, were in the welterweight division. But it was after that 2-fight skid where he would go on an absolute rampage, winning 9 fights in a row, becoming the middleweight champion, and even getting a title defense under his belt, even though technically it didn't register as such because Yoel Romero missed weight for their rematch. And even when he got dethroned by Israel Adesanya, he would win 3 fights in a row and earn himself another crack at gold, where he would ultimately lose the rematch as well, but much more closely contested in a 25-minute decision that time. So we know that Robert Whittaker is capable of bouncing back and righting the ship in his career, but it's the fact now that you add the additional wrinkle into this one, being that he is moving up 20 pounds to the light heavyweight division. And while Nikita Krylov is a perennially top 15 ranked fighter, it isn't as though he is the most elite level light heavyweight in the world, so I do enjoy this matchup for Robert Whittaker. I think it's a good debut opportunity for him, where it's not necessarily a cakewalk, but he definitely has every opportunity in this one to come out victorious, and maybe even in convincing fashion, because Nikita Krylov does not like going to the scorecards, having been finished in 9 out of his 11 losses, but also worth noting that he has gotten finishes in 29 out of 31 professional wins. And somehow, some way, he's only 34 years old, which is absolutely mind-boggling. He's been in the fucking UFC since 2006, it feels like. Not literally, it was actually 2013, but you get the point. He has won 4 of his last 6 bouts and will enter UFC 329 off the heels of a knockout win against Modestas Bukauskas in January at UFC 324, but prior to that was knocked out in consecutive fights against Bogdan Guskov and Dominic Reyes. And we know that Robert Whittaker, when he is on, can get finishes on the feet. He is a very elite level striker. So I look for Nikita Krylov to actually get this fight down to the canvas and take a page out of Khamzat Chimaev's book to utilize his grappling and jiu-jitsu skills for a best path to victory. So can Robert Whittaker's takedown defense hold up? As historically, he does find a lot of success in that realm, 82% overall in his UFC career, but now he's got to do it up 20 pounds in the light heavyweight division, so it could potentially be a whole different ballgame. How do you think that Robert Whittaker is going to look in this weight class? How will his frame fill out? And do you think he will find success against the dangerous Nikita Krylov? Or will Krylov play spoiler, ruin the debut in the weight class of Robert Whittaker, and, to be quite frank with you, pick up the biggest win of his career? Next, we will move to the women's flyweight division, where the number 8 ranked Tracy Cortez will be taking on the number 12 ranked Wang Tong. The 32-year-old Cortez is on a bit of a skid right now, coming off of a loss to Erin Blanchfield in Madison Square Garden last November, where she would be submitted. Did get a win last summer against Viviane Araújo, but then before that lost a main event to Rose Namajunas. So after starting 5-0 in the UFC and having a win on Dana White Contender Series, she now has lost 2 of her last 3 bouts, and she hasn't been the most active fighter by any stretch of the imagination either, as she would only fight 1 time in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. 2025 was the only year that she had competed 2 or more times in the UFC. Mind you, she debuted in 2019. But to be fair, she did compete on the Contender Series in 2019, so I'll give her a little bit of leeway there. So Cortez, in order to remain relevant in the top 10 of the women's flyweight division, not only needs to remain more active and get more fights in, but she has to get a victory here, and it's not going to be easy to do because Wang Tong is one of the best strikers in the the women's flyweight division, even holds a Muay Thai victory against the current champion Valentina Shevchenko many moons ago. But the Joker out of Shanghai, China is 9-1 as a professional mixed martial artist since transitioning over, and much differently from Tracy Cortez, has competed 6 times in the UFC since May of 2024, and is 5-1 in those bouts. The only loss was a massive upset that she suffered to Gabriela Fernandez in November of her debut year. But since then has tallied off 3 consecutive unanimous decision victories over Bruna Brazil, Ariane Lipski, and Eduarda Mora that would earn her a shot into the top 15. And this will already be her second fight of 2026, and if she gets a victory and inserts herself into the top 10, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if she fights one more time before the year is up. This is a grappler versus a striker matchup. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If Wang Tong wants to get the biggest win of her career, she will want to keep this fight standing, keep Tracy Cortez at a distance, and pick her apart on the feet. And for Cortez, she's going to want to close the distance, pressure Wang Tong, get her up against the fence, and take her down to utilize her heavy wrestling and grappling skill set. And the last ranked matchup on the card, we go back to the men's bantamweight division as the number 15 ranked undefeated Farid Basharat will be taking on UFC newcomer John Garza. The 28-year-old ferocious Farid Basharat is 15-0 in his career and is 6-0 in the UFC since debuting in 2023 following a victory on the 2022 season of Dana White Contender Series. And he already has a victory in 2026, a closely contested split decision win over Jean Matsumoto in February, and the biggest win of his career so far was against Chris Gutierrez that he got last October at UFC 320. So now he's looking to go 7-0 in the UFC, and if he gets past the debutant here at UFC 329, it's definitely time to give him a big step up in competition close to the top 10. But John Garza can play big time spoiler here and potentially ruin the momentum of Farid Basharat and hand him the first loss of his career. Garza is 6-1 in his own right and hasn't lost since his second professional bout, meaning that he is on a 5-fight win streak, including 2 consecutive knockout wins heading into this one at UFC 329. He is only 23 years of age and has so much time to still develop his skill sets, and for that reason alone, I feel he is very much behind the 8 ball here against Farid Basharat, but maybe he can pull off the upset, and after just one UFC bout, potentially be a ranked bantamweight already. And just because I'm done talking about the ranked matchups on UFC 329 doesn't mean I'm done talking about the bangers on the rest of the card, and none have more banger potential, none has a more guaranteed crazy finish than this one. King Green and Terrance McKinney, they're kicking off the main card. This will be King Green's 55th professional mixed martial arts contest, and the former Strikeforce veteran has been in the UFC since February of 2013, 13 and a half years ago essentially. He's fought the who's who in this lightweight division, and actually at 39 years old is debatably on the best stretch of his career as he is on a 3-fight win streak with 2 out of the 3 coming by way of stoppage, a submission win over Jeremy Stephens in May, and then a knockout win against Daniel Zellhuber in February. The damn guy's looking to go 3-0 in 2026, and we're only 7 months in. He has 22 finishes and has been finished 9 times, and I have a feeling he's going to be adding at one of those 2 categories here Saturday night, because he is fighting the most entertaining one-round fighter in the 33-year history of the UFC, Terrance T-Rex McKinney. 26 professional fights and has never, not one singular time, gone the distance. 18 wins, 18 finishes, 9 knockouts, 9 submissions, perfectly split 50-50, 8 losses, 5 via knockout, 3 via submission. And not only has he never gone to the scorecards, but he has only left the first round 4 times, and only 1 time in the UFC since debuting in June of 2021 with a 7-second knockout. Talk about making a damn statement. And he is one of the most active fighters in the lightweight division, and we've seen glimpses of elite level skills from Terrance McKinney. The problem is he just gets so reckless and his gas tank empties very quickly. But he has won 3 of his last 4 bouts, including a TKO to kickstart 2026 back in March when he would finish Kyle Nelson. And something worth note is that he is only 31, right now in his fighting prime, whereas Bobby King Green is now 39, closer to the end of his career than the beginning, even though he is riding a hot stretch right now. You cannot blink when these 2 step into the cage. We will see the debut of the former Olympic champion and multiple-time national champion in college, Gable Steveson, who has transitioned over to mixed martial arts and is 3-0 with 3 knockouts to his name and is 26 years old. This could potentially be a massive breath of fresh air and signing for the UFC's heavyweight division. He went 2-0 in 2025 and got a victory in 2026 back in February. All 3 of them happening in the very first round, with the longest bout going 3 minutes and 50 seconds. And he currently sits as the largest betting favorite in UFC history, north of a minus 2,500. And on the comeback is the plus 1,100 underdog Elijah Ellison, looking to play massive spoiler. The 29-year-old is 5-2 and has a 100% finish rate, been finished in both of his losses, has never gone the full distance. But it is worth noting that he lost his UFC debut in September of last year, getting knocked out by Brando Pericic. This is obviously a setup fight here for Gable Steveson to show out on an international fight week card in his debut. And if he gets a victory, the UFC is going to strap a rocket to his back and send him to the moon, because this heavyweight division desperately needs some help right now. But damn it, doesn't Elijah Ellison have an opportunity to absolutely shit on those plans. The former bantamweight champion Cody Garbrandt is back, looking to win his second consecutive fight after one of the most wacky ass fights I've ever seen when he fought Zhao Long back in March at UFC 326. He got kicked in the dick at least 27 times. The fight never got stopped. I think 17 points got deducted from Zhao Long's scorecard, and yet it was still a unanimous decision where he could have potentially even lost. It's clear that Cody Garbrandt is no longer in his prime. We saw him reach his peak nearly a decade ago now. Let us not forget, he won the title in December of 2016 against Dominic Cruz, one of the greatest title fight winning performances in history. But ever since then, there has been a plethora of bad fights and bad performances from Cody, with very few good wins and performances sprinkled in between. But I will always find myself rooting for Cody Garbrandt. I've gotten to meet the guy twice in person, and he's always going to have a fan in me. But this matchup is a tough one because he is taking on a lethal striker in Adrian Yanez, who has 11 out of his 17 wins by way of knockout. This one is going to deliver, and if anything, Cody Garbrandt is going to be the one to look to grapple here, because as good as his striking used to be, specifically in the boxing realm, I don't know if he's going to have it in him to compete in the stand-up with Yanez, who has the opportunity to get the biggest win of his career on Saturday night. We will see teammate of Paddy Pimblett and undefeated prospect Luke Riley fight at UFC 329 with a 13-0 record, with 9 of those 13 by way of knockout, only 27 years of age, and is 2-0 in the UFC, with his debut coming in November of last year and then a decision win against Michael Ashwell in March of this year. And now he's looking to go 3-0 in the Ultimate Fighting Championship by taking on the battle-tested veteran Kai Kamaka III, who just got a victory in his re-debut as his second stint began in the UFC earlier this year. And we're going to see, in my opinion, a very, very supremely underrated hot prospect, Damian Pinas, who is 9-1 and is only 24 years old, with a 100% finish rate, 8 knockouts, 1 submission. Got a first round finish in September of last year on Dana White Contender Series. Debuted back in February with an absolutely devastating knockout against Wesley Schultz, and looks to be all the part of a dangerous man in this middleweight division, and I believe is the only current fighter on the roster right now, although don't quote me on that is fighting out of Aruba. And he is taking on a very dangerous kickboxer in Cesar Almeida, who is definitely up there in age, as he will be 14 years older than Damian heading into UFC 329, looking to keep himself from going on a 2-fight skid. So that is it for the UFC 329 breakdown from start to finish. It is an absolutely loaded fight card, and it's International Fight Week, so damn it, we shouldn't have expected anything less. And now it's time to turn the discussion over to you. I'm going to get all of your thoughts on this card. How would you rate it on a scale from 1 to 10, from A to F? And give me some of your predictions and bets down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week I am previewing and discussing the biggest and best fights and storylines heading into each weekend. In the aftermath of every card, I recap the most meaningful results, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy this loaded fight card, and I will see you all in the next video.